Bold and raw perspectives of local politics. Important information which impacts our community, nation, and world. Exposing truth, transparency, and getting to the heart of relevant issues that you just won't see in the clickbait media. And always keeping it real. It's the Michelle Tanner Podcast.
But I won't back down.
Welcome to the Michelle Tanner Podcast. We've got an awesome episode today. We are going to be talking about the economy and some other awesome things with my amazing guest. But before I get to that and introduce you, I wanted to let y'all know about a few announcements. So this Thursday at 6 p.m. at St. George City Hall is the bond hearing. So a lot of you have probably been hearing about the GO bond that's going to be on the ballot this November. The election is November 21st. Don't forget that day. Very important election. But if you want to speak on behalf of this GO bond, whether for or against it, either way, it's a public hearing. You need to be there this Thursday at 6 p.m. As far as the GO bond, I think we should probably actually do another show. There's so many things to talk about regarding it. So I'll probably try to do that before the election to do a deep dive into the GO bond. But my goal is always to educate, not to sell anyone on anything. I think we're all smart enough to make our own decisions if we are educated on the pros and cons. And that's been my goal with the GO bond. But just know that meeting is coming up this Thursday, 6 p.m. So a few other things in regards to the local city council election. I saw actually just yesterday from Equality Utah, which if you're not familiar with Equality Utah, look them up, but they are probably one of the largest leftist organizations here in the state of Utah. They donate almost exclusively to the Democrats. And as far as the agenda that they push, I mean, you'll see actually on this questionnaire here that you have to fill out in order to actually get a rating from Equality Utah. So they posted their representatives and their candidates who received an A rating from Equality Utah. So we'll post the pictures. We have one of our own actually on that list, Danielle Larkin, who is a current councilwoman here in the city of St. George and also running for re-election. So if you read through these questions, however, it's really interesting. You know, one would actually wonder based off of, you know, the way that one would have to answer these questions to get an A rating, would it essentially mean that if you got an A rating that you believe A, the city should mandate LGBTQ diversity training? Taxpayers should fund city-hosted gay pride celebrations. The city needs an LGBTQ task force. The taxpayers should fund insurance that pays for children and adults using puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and genitalia removal surgery. The city should use forms and applications that ask if someone is a gender other than male, female, such as non-binary. The city should force private businesses to celebrate gay weddings. The city should allow men to use girls' bathrooms and showers in public facilities. These are just all questions I have based off of this questionnaire right there. And I'm told in order to get an A rating, essentially you have to agree with every single one of those questions. So it's not something I'm making up. The questions are right there on Equality Utah's website. These are the people. There's a few others as well on there who got an A rating. So I just think this is important information for people to be aware of here in our local communities, because I don't know about you, but I believe in equal rights. I don't necessarily believe in special rights that we should be having in Equality Utah. I think that would actually be a better name for Equality Utah personally. So just kind of found that interesting. Also, I noticed yesterday, now I am blocked from seeing Mayor Randall's post, but several people sent me yesterday this post. Apparently, there's been some vandalism of some campaign signs of Danielle Larkin that Mayor Randall posted about. And, you know, it's kind of interesting because on that post, another candidate who has also had campaign signs vandalized, Eros Mackey, commented and asked the mayor, why is it that you haven't discussed any of the other candidates' campaign signs that were vandalized? And interestingly enough, Eros was actually blocked as well, along with several other people. And I guess that post is gone altogether now. But I mean, I think it's a legitimate question. Why would she be singling out one council member who had their signs supposedly vandalized, which, I don't agree at all with vandalizing signs. It was apparently a little sticker, rainbow sticker that says something along the lines of Councilwoman Larkin supports all-age drag shows, which to me, that's actually interesting. Again, I don't support vandalizing campaign signs, but it's also, if that's what you align with, which, I mean, Danielle Larkin has attended all-age drag shows. I think it's pretty common knowledge at this point that that's something that she has supported. So shouldn't you be proud that that's where you align, or that's where your candidate aligns? It's just interesting to me. Anyway, on to more important discussions. So I have with me here a really awesome guest. He is a former Air Force pilot. He is a commercial airline pilot. He has a degree in economics. And most importantly, he's my dad. So I want you all to meet my dad, Jace Hardy. I actually really wanted him to come on today because I talk to him a lot about the economy. And I have two heroes when it comes to economics, Thomas Sowell and Jace Hardy. So I'm really glad to have my dad here. So I feel like we are in difficult economic times. Like the brink is here. We're on the brink of something coming. So I wanted to delve into that a little bit with you. Where do you feel like we are right now as a country, as a city, with our economy? What things do you see forecasted based off of your knowledge, for the future? What things can we be doing to prepare? So let's just delve right in.
Well, thanks for having me here, Michelle. It's not something I necessarily wanted to do, to come on the air, but
I had to talk him into it.
But you're my daughter, and actually, it's a privilege that you had me on here, and that you value my opinion so highly. Well, you said it well. I feel like we are on the brink, but I'm also, through long and hard experience, reminded of the quote, and I can't remember who said it first, that your ability to remain short your ability to be short and to remain solvent will be long outlasted by the market's ability to be to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I mean by that is, yes, we're on the brink, but these things can take a long time to play out. Looking on towards the end of the decade, I don't know how we get to 2030 anywhere in the position we are now. I think that before that time, we're going to have a major financial crisis. And I say that based on the fact that we're in so much debt. And not only public debt, but private debt. And so we can go back historically and look at previous times that are similar to this. And actually, we're known worse times than what we are now as a country.
So we are in the worst financial position we have ever been in as a country.
In my opinion, and I say that because the debt towards the end of World War II pretty much equals where we are now as far as our federal debt goes. Right now, we're about 1.3 times our GDP, our gross domestic product in federal national debt. And that's where we were at the end of World War II. But the difference was we had much larger personal savings. And so we could compensate for that during that period of time, and we were able to pay it off actually fairly rapidly. And so what happened is during World War II, with the war effort, which helped get us out of the Great Depression, and business and industry spun up for the war effort, and that was financed largely through back then it was very patriotic. My parents talked about it, buying U.S. bonds. It ended up being kind of a ripoff to the holders, but it was done for noble reasons. It financed the war effort.
Mm-hmm.
And
so bonds in that scenario were actually a good thing, in your opinion?
Well, yeah. I mean, bonds are neither a good thing or a bad thing in and of itself.
Okay.
It is the way the government borrows. It's through bonds, through T-bills, notes, and bonds. Mm-hmm. They're all treasuries. But the difference is we're not in that position anymore with high personal savings. And at the end of World War II, we were able to rotate into an economy where all those factors of production rotated into manufacturing automobiles, airplanes, the national highway system. And so it translated into more productive inputs that created wealth and growth in the ensuing decades. But we're not there now. We're in debt, and sometimes debt can be good. If a business goes into debt to invest in what will give a higher rate of return over surpassing whatever that cost of debt is, then in the long run that can be a good thing, mm-hmm. right? But we have not been investing that way as a country. Our debt it's all transfer payments. It's all up in smoke. There's nothing coming back in return.
How do we recover from that? I mean, because we're talking trillions of dollars in debt, which is hard to even fathom. Is there a way back from that?
Well, to give you an idea, in the last 3 months, we've put $3 trillion more dollars on the balance sheets, on the Treasury balance sheets. And the reason, now there is an extenuating reason, and that's because the debt ceiling was held up until June, and then finally Congress approved an ongoing increase in the debt ceiling till 2025. And so they had to catch up. The Treasury General Account, the TGA, was pretty much dry, so they had to replenish it. But that was only for part of it. The other part is spending has been going gangbusters. Our budget increased. I can't remember. I saw one where it was 14% over the year previous. I'm not quite sure if that includes that increased those increased Treasury sales or not.
It's hard to imagine how that would even be moral, that our representatives would be, say, sending billions over to the Ukraine while over here we're in this dire financial situation. It's, not to mention all of the other senseless programs that our government funds. It's just, from a moral standpoint, it's hard to even fathom getting away with that.
It is a moral issue. David Hume, 18th century, he was a protege of Adam Smith. This is what he said way back then. He talking about national debt, liking it unto a metastasizing cancer. If it isn't completely cut out, it will eventually consume the whole host. It must indeed be one of these two events. Either the nation must destroy public credit, or public credit will destroy the nation.
Wow.
And that's where we are. So you ask what we do from here. We can only mitigate the damages. We can't. It's too late. In my opinion, we've gone beyond the Rubicon. And I'm an airline pilot. I kind of like it into aviation. When you're flying the airplane, actually, the slower you go, the less thrust you need, right? Until you get to the point where you get what we call L over D max, lift over drag, the max lift for the least amount of drag. And then beyond, slower than that point, you don't need less thrust. You need more thrust. And you get into that regime where if you don't recover, you get into a stall and then you fall out of the sky. And that's kind of where we are right now. And we require way too much thrust to get out of this.
Yeah. Because
this is the deal. If you take the budget, 1.7 trillion just goes to defense and everything else other than to entitlements. Do you know what?
Wow.
We just have like one. Our deficit this year was like 1 trillion. 1.2 is supposed to be next year, and it's increasing. And we have a wartime economy during peacetime. This is relative peacetime.
Wow.
So there's all kinds of things that are going to come up that are going to require the government to spend more money, and financing that debt is where the problem is going to be. Being able to service the debt, it's going to be impossible, because what we're going to get into is a debt spiral. And actually, last week, we actually saw a little bit of signs of it when you saw spikes in the longer-term bonds. Up until now, we've had yield inversion, which means the short-term treasuries have actually had a higher interest rate than long-term treasuries. So the 2-year, for example, about 5.5 now, and the 10-year about 4.5. Well, then that 10-year and the 20-year has been spiking. You got to understand, the bond market is huge. It's the biggest market in the world. It dwarfs the stock market. And what matters there matters the most. The stock market is not good as a forecaster. They look at, people look at the stock market as to what's going on in the economy. It's not very good at depicting what's going on in the economy. The bond market is.
Interesting.
You got trillions of dollars, 80, 100 trillions of dollars betting on what's going to be happening in the future. And that's what interest rates are based on. Those long-term rates have been lower because forecasters know we're going to have lower growth. And I was just looking this morning at the Congressional Budget Office forecast for the next 10 years about where we are going to be in deficits. And then I look at their forecast growth rates. They're dreaming. Revenues are increase in revenues are very much based on growth in the economy. Mm-hmm. If you don't have growth, you don't have in the economy, you won't have growth in revenues. And so what's going to happen as more and more debt gets put on the balance sheets, that interest rate and rates will go up, even though short term, intermediate term, we may have some corrections.
So you think that interest rates are going to continue to go up? Overall,
yes, I do. And that's against what, a lot of analysts are saying, but they will. And it's a kind of a supply and demand issue, even though, there won't be enough buyers out there of bonds, of treasuries, to keep rates down. They'll have to put rates up because we're talking about numbers so large in financing, and it's not just us too. It's the European Union, European countries are actually worse off than the United States, and China the same. China is even worse off than the EU or we are, and so yeah, I think in the long term and what's going to happen is as rates go up, we're going to find ourselves in this debt spiral. It'll end up in an implosion in bonds where prices will have to drop, which is the opposite of that. Yields will have to go up, and then we're in a place where we are in that region of no return, and the only way out of it is to monetize debt, and that's can become highly inflationary.
Yeah.
And that's what I think is the end result. In fact, if you look at some of the, demographers around that, look at Ray Dalio. He's been manager of one of the biggest hedge funds in the United States and also one of the more successful. And admittedly, I haven't read his writings recently, but he goes into depth. He goes back historically what happens when nations get in this trouble. And without exception, no exceptions, their monetary system fails. So
what does that mean to the average person? Because we're already experiencing right now the results of inflation and, and the dollar amount we're paying for our groceries, for everything. The cost of goods have skyrocketed. So to kind of dumb this down, are you saying that we are just going to continue to see that inflation pattern go higher and higher and higher?
No, nothing goes in a straight line. It won't go up higher. We're talking now. When I speak in the future, an intermediate term to me is 6 months to 2 years, and so In the intermediate term, no. I think inflation will stay probably about where it is, and I think interest rates will come down. And interest rates in the short term, in my opinion, will for sure be coming down when we start having some market events, and which are sure to happen. And then the Fed gets anxiety, and they realize they have to reduce rates to right now. The numbers look pretty good in the economy. In fact, I was looking at the consumer spending numbers month over month, month over year, and they far exceeded what was forecast. But so right now everyone thinks everything is great, but they don't realize if they look at the debt situation, not only national federal debt but personal debt, it's in the negative.
Yeah.
I mean, credit card delinquencies are starting to spike. Your average credit card rate's about 20%.
Wow.
And you look at other problem areas with commercial real estate. You look at 20. I was looking at this yesterday. 33% of the Russell 2000. That's your lower cap publicly traded stocks. 33% are negative equity, meaning that they're borrowing money to pay to service debt.
Wow.
They have no so they're zombie companies, and so you can guarantee. I guarantee you, over the next 2-3 years, you're going to see rolling cascades of more and more bankruptcies, and you're going to see some more bank failures too. In the spring, you saw 3 or 4 regional banks go down. There'll be a lot more of that because, and that's going to come really soon, I think, because of the fact that rates are on the front end are still much higher, and they haven't been able to adjust.
Right.
And I don't want to get into the reasons why, but
well, and even here locally, actually, the last few months we have had a downturn in overall sales tax revenue, which has kind of put the city on alert to start pulling back some of our spending and projects. So to me, that's interesting, and I don't know if that's indicative of what's going to happen next year, if things are going to continue in that pattern. Do you have any thoughts here locally from what you've seen, at a national level and a trickle down effect, if you think that's going to impact us here at the local level?
I do. I think it will impact us. However, I'd rather be in St. George, Utah than LA, San Francisco, or some of the other areas. So, I think we're in a good spot, relatively speaking, but sure, it's going to affect us. It's going to affect Utah. But maybe it'll be, like the great financial crisis. It affected Utah less than it did a lot of other places. But then again, Utah is very heavy into tech. And I think interest rates affect technology big time because a lot of it's so leveraged. So, yeah, it'll affect us.
So short term, you see interest rates probably coming down some, but in the more distant future, you think they're going to drastically increase?
Yeah, there'll be corrections along the way. And right now, on the 10-year, we hit like 4.8 something the other day. So, and then we corrected a little bit, and now I noticed this morning we're rallying back up to close to our previous high. And that's a previous high from, 20 years ago. I mean, I'm not sure how far back, but it's been many years since interest rates were that high. So, yeah, what'll happen is the Fed always, once we get, things start really breaking really bad, in order to rescue things, they'll drop rates. It's the most immediate thing they can do. And also the Fed has been tightening, meaning they've been reducing their balance sheets. They've been taking their treasuries off their balance sheets and selling it out on the open market. And so that's been sucking in liquidity too. That will reverse. So
you mean they're not just going to keep printing more money?
Well, yeah, they haven't been printing. Actually, they haven't been printing for since, the great deficit spending after the COVID crash, so probably for the last year or so, they've been contracting. So yeah, growth in money supply is not the issue right now. it's down pretty much even, or plus or minus 5%, where we had peaks around 30% annualized in M2 money growth right after the COVID, and that's what causes inflation. Inflation is caused by creation of money, that its growth exceeds the creation of goods and services. And that's what exactly happened during the COVID crisis. And not only that, but with that printed money, the government was putting all that, cash into people's bank accounts, and they were immediately going out and spending it.
Right.
So where the productive side of the economy was held back, the demand side was accelerated, and that's why we had inflation. So that process is reversed now, and that's why inflation has gone down. And I believe as things slow down, it will continue to slow down. And so interest rates will drop. They'll go through ups and downs. But over time, because servicing the debt consumes more and more of the budget each year, you got to understand that by 2030, there'll be no surplus. Actually, there's no surplus now, but in our entitlement spending, we will have no more there in what is supposed to be on the ledger sheets for us to spend in entitlements. Then they'll have to take that from the general fund, in addition to the fact that they don't even have enough to. Right now, we're spending this last year. We've spent about 8%. 8% has been borrowed money, not of the federal outlays, but of the whole GDP. Can you imagine? Everything spent in the economy, 8% is borrowed by the federal government. That's what's happened this last year.
Wow.
And so with that going forward, now that may contract, might get lesser percentage, 3 or 4 or 5%. But at this point, it doesn't matter. We're talking about numbers so large that in order to service that debt, as they issue more treasuries to finance that debt, they're going to have to attract buyers. So they're going to have to increase rates, which reduces bond prices.
So how does that look long term? Because you're mentioning, 2030 is kind of the number. You don't see us making it there. So how does that look for the average person? How is that going to affect us personally if that crisis happens, how you're kind of predicting it will?
Well, the easiest way out of it, which I think is going to happen, is, like I'm just saying, it's going to result in inflation. They're going to try and inflate their, which is really a default. And so it's going to lead to all kinds of problems, a lot of social unrest. And, I'm only speculating like everyone else, all the issues that'll arise. But the best we can do is prepare now. If you're a young person, get the best education and training you can, and always be thinking about a plan B. Mm-hmm. Do well in school if you're, in college or high school, and get yourself in the best, because there'll always be a demand for services and goods. Human needs are insatiable. So, and then if you're in your young and middle age, if you're an income earner, I hope you're setting money aside. Be investing it. What should you be putting it in? I would not be putting it just in an index fund and letting it ride and depend on dollar cost averaging to take you through and have a larger nest egg at the end. Find a good money manager who is the manager of those funds, not a passive manager, but an active manager, and who can know where to go. Right now, I'm heavily invested in commodities. Gold and silver, and incidentally, another leading indicator is copper. We look at Dr. Copper as an indicator of what things might come. And copper right now is tanking.
Oh,
by the way.
interesting.
Yeah. Another indicator: federal revenues increasing. Federal revenues are not increasing; they're decreasing. If we had an expanding economy, we wouldn't be having revenues go down, would be having them go up. So back to your question, I think gold, small percentage of it should be in bullion, so stored in a good place. I like gold eagles, American Eagle 1 ounce eagles because they're at the most liquid form of gold you can buy. If things go down, you lose the electricity, or things are in chaos. Maybe you can exchange that for something else and go buy your groceries, or buy silver eagles. And those you should have as a small portion of your investment. And then what I do, I aim for like between 5 and like 15% in precious metals that I buy. I'm a trader more than an investor. So I buy and sell, depending on what the charts are showing me. And then, but that's my largest portion of my portfolio right now. And then there's always going to be good sectors to invest in, and that's why you need a good money manager to manage your portfolio, and you'll do well. I look at it as a period of opportunity, because with these trying times that are sure to come, right now the Standard & Poor's 500 is around 4,300, 4,400. We'll be going below the COVID lows, which was around 2,300 in the next couple of years. That's my forecast, and you can hold me to that forecast.
Well,
but with that, see, there comes opportunities. So hopefully you'll be more in cash and then be able to take advantage of those opportunities for short-term bounces.
What do you think about all of this push toward digital banking and a central bank and, doing everything digitally, social credit scores? Do you see us ever moving in the direction of, unless you're meeting certain social statuses and cooperating the way government sees you should be cooperating, that you won't be able to actually function monetarily in society? I mean, we see it already in places like China. Do you see that coming here?
Well, hopefully there's enough of us that can get legislation passed to prohibit that. In fact, I saw a bill in Congress last week that I'm not sure where it got. Republicans have to be in charge, but hopefully we can stop that. Although I should be, given the way we've been going the last few years, that may not be the case. And so, yes, it's a real threat.
Yeah.
Unless if we can stop it legislatively.
Right.
I mean, it is right now. I believe it's beyond the purview of the Fed to be able to do that. I think it violates their charter if they do that.
Right.
So I'm not sure. I know there's a real push to do that, go in that direction, and it would be terrible, absolutely terrible. Look, when you have the Fed, and the Fed is nothing more than even though they're private entity, they're nothing but an extension of the federal government.
Right, because that's an argument I hear a lot is, when people talk about the Fed, well, that's not government. So, I mean, essentially, it still is an extension, though, like you're saying, even though it's...
Listen, they implement... It's all political.
Right.
I mean, if it wasn't for the Fed, the deficit wouldn't be where it is. They accommodate. It's because of the Fed being able to do what they do, to buy up balance sheets off the Treasury, that they're, the Treasury is where it is, so much in the deficit. If you go back, during the Greenspan area, the 90s, early 2000s, he had this ZIRP policy, the zero interest rate policy, where he wanted to put rates down close to zero as he could and hold them there because it was supposed to spur the economy. But what that did is it made government funding cheap. They could borrow all they wanted, and business and corporations as well, and it didn't cost them hardly anything. There's no interest rate hardly to pay on. And so that encouraged so much malinvestment on the private side and so much over-government spending on the public side. Yeah, I mean, the Federal Reserve is culpable. They were implementing government policy, and yeah, they're a private entity, but in my opinion, they've done a lot more harm than good.
Absolutely.
And let me just take a minute and explain why.
Okay.
Because, the business cycles in the economy have always been there, and they're there for a reason. Because as Joseph Schumpeter Schumpeter, an economist 100 years ago, pointed out that it's a way that, as we have these downturns, bankruptcies and downturns and layoffs, and then, government businesses go insolvent. It's a way that the economy becomes more efficient because it leaves the strongest players in place, and it puts us into an upward trajectory overall as technology has to increase, as business has to find most efficient ways to produce. But if you get in the way of that business cycle by keeping interest rates low, you have all this malinvestment. Now you come up with all these zombie companies, and they multiply. And so what happens when the eventual fall comes, it's much worse. And that's where we are now because of what the Federal Reserve has been doing. Every business cycle, when there's threats of destruction, that they step in, interest rates go to zero, they monetize debt. And so in doing this, what's over the last 20 years, a lot of this monetization, though, and a lot of this, the benefit of these interest rates have been trapped in financial markets.
Right.
They haven't gone out. The benefit hasn't gone out to the the spender.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's happened is it's been the owner of those equities that have benefited the most. And who are the owners? It's the upper income.
Yeah.
They own 95% of the wealth. And so
Right.
we have this great wealth divide that's expanding bigger and bigger, and which is going to be the source of more social unrest. What's
Right.
that caused by? It's not caused by tax rates being not high enough. It's caused by the Federal Reserve, this zero interest rate policy, encourage malinvestment, with benefit being in the financial sector, and the benefits rolling to the upper income class. And that's why you've had this divide it's expanding. And they will be increasing tax rates, Democrats, but that's not the solution to bring about a more equitable society.
Right. Well, and speaking of that class divide, a big thing that I hear candidates here locally talk about is affordable housing and what they're going to do as a government representative to help affordable housing. So back to economics 101, what are your thoughts with affordable housing and government's involvement there, and how do we help the housing situation as we do see this separation of classes get even more drastic?
Well, throughout the country, you see examples of public housing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, New York, where rents are controlled and, subsidies. I'm not for it. I think that I think it creates a lot more harm than good.
Absolutely.
I think you got to let the market take care of it. Yeah, I mean, you can encourage developers to come in, but they have to have a profit motive to do it.
Right.
And it shouldn't be done through subsidies,
Mm-hmm.
but, just through zoning.
Yeah, I think just getting government red tape out of the way. There's so many that could cut a lot of time and expense right there for developers by government just taking a step back and saying, yeah, do what you will. You want to build a lower cost product, do it.
Right. That there is the most, that's the best way to go about doing it, is not necessarily through government stepping in and filling in the gap.
Right.
I really have strong feelings about that, because in the long run, it creates too many disincentives and malinvestments, and it's to our benefit as a community if we want to keep our environment, our financial environment, our economy going here, that we don't allow government to get too big,
Right.
Involved in private industry.
Because every government solution creates another problem, in my experience.
Exactly. And I would say the same thing with Tech Ridge, and, just step back, create the environment where, business, home building can succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And if it can't succeed, then it shouldn't be here.
Right.
But and then consumers, they step up to do what they have to do,
Yeah.
To either just settle on something less. They're going forward. debt is nothing more than claims on future earnings. Future.
Right. So we're down to just a few seconds left. We'll probably need a part 2, but just final thoughts on what you would recommend for people moving forward.
Prepare for bad times to come, but be optimistic in your personal life as you do so, to treat it as an opportunity.
Awesome.
Thanks for being a part of the Michelle Tanner Podcast. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share. And always remember to keep exposing truth.
But I won't back down. No, I won't back down.
This has been a production from a podcast studio.